Have you ever felt like your life was slipping away, as if you had lost a part of yourself? Have you ever stood at a crossroads, unsure of which way to go? Nora Seed, a woman who once thought she understood the meaning of life, now faces that question once again. And this time, it's not just about seeking a new life, but about truly living with what she already has. After a miraculous journey through the Midnight Library, where she explored countless different lives, Nora returns to the real world, her heart heavy with unanswered questions. But one night, as she unintentionally flips through the pages of an old book, something strange happens. A letter appears, inviting her to return to the library once more. But this time, the library is not just a place to choose different lives. It is the key to answering the biggest question of her existence. What is my purpose? This next journey is not just a search for meaning, but a confrontation with herself, with the choices she has left behind, and with the people she once loved. Can Nora change her life once again, or will she find herself lost in the choices of the past? Join this story, a journey filled with mystery, surprises, and deep reflections, where every step is a decision, and every decision has the power to change a life. Nora Seed once thought she had completely escaped her painful past and the wrong choices that had left her drowning in a sense of meaninglessness. But after returning from the Midnight Library, where she had lived through thousands of different lives, searching for purpose and meaning, she still couldn't shake one lingering question. Have I truly found my purpose? One morning, as the faint light of dawn streamed through the window of her small apartment, Nora received a strange letter. She opened it with trembling hands, even though she had tried to free herself from the ghosts of her past. The letter was handwritten, inked in blue, with a short but compelling message. The library is waiting for you. A familiar feeling surged within her, as if a part of her was being pulled back to that place, the Midnight Library. But this time, it wasn't the same as before. Since the first time she stepped into that mysterious library, Nora had always wondered why she was chosen to experience lives that no one else could. Did the library truly exist in this world, or was it merely a construct of her mind, a hallucination created to help her confront her pain, failures, and regrets? That question had haunted her, but she never expected that this time, the library would pull her back once more. And this journey would not only change her, it would change the people around her as well. She stood up, feeling a mix of confusion and an unexplainable pull from the letter. Yes, the library had been where she found answers, but it was also where she had faced some of her hardest decisions. Why had it appeared in her life again when she thought she had finally found her way out? Perhaps she was still not ready to face the bigger questions about her existence. Or maybe the library had a different purpose for her, one she had yet to understand. Nora grabbed her bag and stepped out the door. She didn't know exactly what she was searching for, but the pull inside her was strong enough to make her choose this journey once more. The doors of the library remained closed, but this time, she was certain she would walk through them again, not just to find an escape, but to uncover the final answer she had missed before. The different lives she had explored were only fragments of an unfinished story. And this time, she hoped she would finally find its completion. Why was the library calling her back? Would she find the answers to the lingering questions, or would she only be met with more choices that would continue her search? The answers to all these questions could only be found in that enigmatic library, a place where every choice seemed to hold a different meaning, a new path she had never dared to take before. Nora Seed woke up in her small room, the light from the window casting shadows over the cracks on the walls. Yet it wasn't enough to dispel the gloom that filled the space around her. She had returned to the real world, where everything seemed unchanged. The memories of the Midnight Library still lingered in her mind, like fragments of a dream she couldn't fully grasp. This world, where she had once felt everything was meaningless, now felt emptier and lonelier than ever. That emptiness felt like a part of her, as if there was a deep hole in her soul that no matter how much she tried to fill, it was never enough. She had once believed that other lives, other choices, would bring her a sense of completeness, a clear purpose. But now, back back in this reality, she realized that not everything she had searched for out there could change this life she was living. Even returning to her family and her job did nothing to ease the overwhelming sense of uncertainty within her. Nora's apartment was nothing special. A cramped space filled with old furniture she had no interest in changing. She lived a monotonous life, going to the psychiatric hospital every day, where she worked, taking care of patients suffering from depression, anxiety, and other mental health issues. Though she had a stable job, every morning when she woke up, she felt exhausted, lacking the motivation to continue. The people around her seemed to have only one purpose in life: to keep existing. They never questioned why, never sought answers about the meaning of life. They simply lived each day as it came. But for Nora, that was a question that weighed on her mind constantly, a question she couldn't escape. On an ordinary day, like any other, she walked into the hospital. She greeted the familiar patients, but in their eyes, she found no connection. She smiled at them, but inside, she felt like a stranger. Each patient she cared for seemed like a version of herself, struggling with emotions and thoughts they couldn't explain, couldn't process. They were all searching for a way out, a reason to hold on, a purpose that would keep them going. But as she looked at them, Nora realized she was in the same state. She too couldn't find that reason, couldn't recognize her own purpose. At night, she returned to her small room. Sometimes she thought about the people who had left her life, the old friends she had lost contact with, the loved ones she had drifted away from due to her own solitude. The lives she had once imagined, the paths she had left behind, all felt like hazy memories, fragments erased by years of living in disappointment and sadness. One of the things that made Nora feel most lost was her relationship with her family. She had a mother who loved her, but they had never truly understood each other. Her mother had always had high expectations, always trying to impose her own desires onto her daughter's life. Nora felt the weight of those expectations every time she returned home, feeling as if she could never truly be herself. Her mother found comfort in the stability of life, but for Nora, that stability felt like a chain wrapped around her existence. She had tried many times to connect with her mother, but every time they faced each other, the distance between them only seemed to grow. Her mother never asked about the deep thoughts in her soul, only about simple things like whether Nora had a boyfriend or if she was living a stable life. Those questions made Nora feel like she could never share her pain or her true thoughts. She had sought understanding from her mother, but she could never find it. This made her feel distant, gradually becoming an outsider in her own family. Friendships were no easier. Nora had a few old friends, people she had once been close to in her youth, but as life changed, those relationships faded. She realized that even when she tried to reconnect with them, the conversations were no longer the same. Her social connections had become shallow, and she felt lost in a world where she no longer found any real sense of belonging. Every meeting left her feeling like she was wearing an oversized coat, something that no longer fit her. She also realized that much of the loneliness she felt was of her own making. Even though the people around her loved and cared for her, she couldn't open up to them. She had built an invisible wall, separating herself from the world. She feared being hurt, feared facing emotions she couldn't control. She was afraid to admit that she was not perfect, and terrified that others would not accept her if they knew about the wounds inside her. Sometimes, Nora wondered if she could change her life. Could she find joy in small things? Or would she continue living in disappointment, like a ghost drifting through days without purpose? She knew that she had to find the answer to that question herself, but she had no idea where to start. The lives she had tried in the library had taught her that every choice held its own meaning, but returning to reality, she felt lost without a clear path. She couldn't remember the goals, the dreams she had once cherished. Only one thing was clear: she couldn't continue living like this. And even though she didn't know what to do, she knew she needed change. Every morning, Nora told herself that she would not live in that emptiness anymore. She would do small things to change her life. seek simple joys, learn to love herself, and open up more to others. Maybe the journey would be long. Maybe she would have to face many challenges. But she knew that, just like in the other lives she had experienced, only when she dared to face herself could she truly find meaning in this life. Nora Seed sat alone on the sofa in her small apartment, the dim afternoon light filtering through the window, casting a glow on the colorless paintings hanging on the wall. She stared at the clock on the table, but time no longer seemed to matter. Every day felt the same, a sequence of repeated moments, hours slipping by meaninglessly, as if she existed somewhere outside the real world. The silence and emptiness clung to her, even though she knew she had changed. That she had learned the meaning of life did not come from what she possessed or the milestones she had achieved. Since returning from the Midnight Library, where she had witnessed millions of different lives, Nora had come to understand that every choice, every action could lead to vastly different outcomes. She had felt the transformation within herself upon realizing that there was no single right path. But at the same time, this awareness only made her feel more uncertain about herself. Was the life she was living now truly the right choice? Was she really living fully, or was she merely waiting for some external change to give her a sense of purpose? The biggest question Nora could not answer was, what is my purpose? Although she no longer felt the same despair as before, when she believed she was trapped in a cycle of failures and losses, Nora still couldn't find peace in the present. She understood that every choice brought different results, but she didn't always feel satisfied with the choices she had made. She looked at her current job, a position at a small bookstore where she wasn't faced with too many challenges, but also had no opportunities to grow. This job provided stability but no fulfillment. She couldn't say she was passionate about it. Sometimes she felt like a shadow, quietly passing through each day without leaving a mark. Every morning, she woke up only wishing for the day to pass quickly so she could return to the solitude of her small apartment in the evening. There were moments when Nora wondered if she was wasting her life. She had been given the chance to experience so many different lives through the library, and while she had found versions of herself that felt happy and free, she couldn't seem to connect with her real life. She questioned whether she could change everything at this very moment, or if it was already too late to find the passion and purpose she had always been searching for. Looking back at her past, Nora realized that there were pivotal moments she could not undo. She had abandoned her dream of writing books simply because she felt she wasn't good enough, not talented enough to make it happen. She had let go of relationships she once believed were important out of fear of being hurt, of being left behind again. And in all those moments of letting go, Nora felt as though she had lost an essential part of herself. One of the things that made Nora feel most incomplete was her relationships with those around her. Although she had friends, those connections never felt truly deep. She once had a close childhood friend, but after an incident in the past, they gradually drifted apart. The feeling of loneliness, even when surrounded by loved ones, was something Nora could never escape. She looked at the people around her and saw them living the kind of lives she longed for. Happy families, loving relationships, and careers they were passionate about. Nora asked herself, why couldn't she have that? Why couldn't she find a path that led to true happiness like they did? She realized that it wasn't that she lacked opportunities to love or to live a meaningful life, but she always felt like she was standing on the sidelines, more of an observer than an active participant. She would sit alone in a cafe, watching couples around her, wondering if they felt the completeness in love that she so deeply desired. Perhaps it was the absence of love and genuine relationships that made her feel like her life lacked meaning. This sense of emptiness also manifested in her relationship with herself. Nora realized that despite all the challenges she had faced, she still hadn't fully accepted herself. She felt as if she wasn't truly living, that she wasn't facing her fears or insecurities. She didn't know how to break through the barriers in her own mind to live a full and fulfilling life. Even though she had learned from the different lives she had experienced in the library that no choice was ever perfect, Nora still couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't yet found her true purpose. She knew she couldn't live in the past forever, but at the same time, she didn't know what to do with the present. She felt stuck between choices, living a quiet, unremarkable life or daring to try something new, even if she had no idea what risks she might face. One night, as she sat gazing at the stars in the dark sky, she once again asked herself, "What is my purpose?" And the question returned, like a wave crashing endlessly against the shore. She knew no one could answer that question for her. But deep down, she realized that life was not a problem to be solved with a simple answer. Everyone had their own path, and hers might not yet be fully drawn, but it was still the path she had to walk. Nora understood that to find her purpose, she couldn't keep looking back at the past or dwelling on her failures. She needed to confront her fears, the voids in her life, and step outside her comfort zone. The most important thing wasn't to find the answer immediately, but to be willing to embrace life with everything it brought. The failures, the pain, and the choices she had made. Nora knew there wasn't a single road to happiness, but she was the one who had to create it. Every step, whether small or large, was part of her journey to discovering her purpose. And one day, when she looked back, she would realize that it was those choices, both the mistakes and the right decisions, that had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. One of the things that made Nora feel most incomplete was her relationships with those around her. Although she had friends, those connections never felt truly deep. She once had a close childhood friend, but after an incident in the past, they gradually drifted apart. The feeling of loneliness, even when surrounded by loved ones, was something Nora could never escape. She looked at the people around her and saw them living the kind of lives she longed for. Happy families, loving relationships, and careers they were passionate about. Nora asked herself, why couldn't she have that? Why couldn't she find a path that led to true happiness like they did? She realized that it wasn't that she lacked opportunities to love or to live a meaningful life, but she always felt like she was standing on the sidelines, more of an observer than an active participant. She would sit alone in a cafe, watching couples around her, wondering if they felt the completeness and love that she so deeply desired. Perhaps it was the absence of love and genuine relationships that made her feel like her life lacked meaning. This sense of emptiness also manifested in her relationship with herself. Nora realized that despite all the challenges she had faced, she still hadn't fully accepted herself. She felt as if she wasn't truly living, that she wasn't facing her fears or insecurities. She didn't know how to break through the barriers in her own mind to live a full and fulfilling life. Even though she had learned from the different lives she had experienced in the library that no choice was ever perfect, Nora still couldn't shake the feeling that she hadn't yet found her true purpose. She knew she couldn't live in the past forever, but at the same time, she didn't know what to do with the present. She felt stuck between choices, living a quiet, unremarkable life or daring to try something new, even if she had no idea what risks she might face. One night, as she sat gazing at the stars in the dark sky, she once again asked herself, "What is my purpose?" And the question returned, like a wave crashing endlessly against the shore. She knew no one could answer that question for her, but deep down, she realized that life was not a problem to be solved with a simple answer. Everyone had their own path, and hers might not yet be fully drawn, but it was still the path she had to walk. Nora understood that to find her purpose, she couldn't keep looking back at the past or dwelling on her failures. She needed to confront her fears, the voids in her life, and step outside her comfort zone. The most important thing wasn't to find the answer immediately, but to be willing to embrace life with everything it brought. The failures, the pain, and the choices she had made. Nora knew there wasn't a single road to happiness, but she was the one who had to create it. Every step, whether small or large, was part of her journey to discovering her purpose. And one day, when she looked back, she would realize that it was those choices, both the mistakes and the right decisions, that had led her to exactly where she was meant to be. Nora sat in the library, a place where she had once found salvation, a place that could transport her to any life beyond this reality. But this time, As she stepped into the library, a strange sensation took hold of her mind. The library was no longer a place filled with hope and infinite choices as it once was. Now, it felt like a mysterious world, full of unanswered questions. As Nora's hand accidentally brushed against the old bookshelves, a small, worn brown book suddenly fell from the shelf. She bent down, picked it up, and realized it was an old journal, its cover frayed and its pages tinged with yellow. An odd feeling swept over her, as if this book had always been waiting for her. Not just any book, but this journal. She sat down in the chair next to the table and opened the first page. The journal began with elegant handwriting, the kind of script that belonged to someone who had lived through many years, carrying deep reflections on life. May 12, 1994. If you are reading this, perhaps my life has completely changed. But am I truly on the right path? Or am I just a dreamer caught in a storm? Nora read the first lines and felt an uncanny connection. These words did not just belong to someone from the past. They carried a tone she could feel resonating inside her. She kept reading, and with each page, it felt like a key unlocking doors within her soul. The story within the journal began to unveil the life of a woman Nora couldn't remember. This woman's life was full of choices and regrets, like a dark fairy tale. She had once lived a life filled with hope and dreams, but everything changed on a fateful day. The next page spoke of a crucial decision the writer had to make, a choice filled with contradictions. I must decide whether to stay and live a safe, stable life or step into the unknown, where I cannot predict the outcome. I chose to step forward, but was that a mistake? These words stirred something deep inside Nora, a familiarity she couldn't explain. It was as if part of this story was mirroring her own life. As Nora continued reading, the journal revealed a series of choices the writer had made, with outcomes that were not always what she had hoped for. Mistakes and failures filled the pages, each one like a blade cutting deeper into the writer's soul. Yet, the following lines carried acceptance. Despite the mistakes of my past, I know that those very mistakes have shaped who I am today. No choice is perfect, but I will not regret what I have chosen. Nora kept reading, feeling herself getting lost in a story she couldn't pull away from. Deep emotions began to settle in her heart. She didn't know who the writer was, but one thing was certain. She was living a life much like this woman's, filled with imperfect choices and decisions whose outcomes she could never predict. But then, a detail in the journal made Nora pause and reflect. In one passage, the writer described a strange event she couldn't explain. One night, I dreamt of a man I did not know. He told me that every decision I made did not just affect my life, but also the lives of others I had never met. Am I living a story that is not entirely my own? A shiver ran down Nora's spine. These words were not just sentences in an old book. They felt like a warning, a reminder about the choices she had made in her life, the decisions she had taken, and those she was yet to make. Each word in the journal echoed through Nora's mind. She began noticing strange signs in her own life. Unexpected events, people she had met, changes in her relationships. All of them seeming to be connected in a way she couldn't yet comprehend. Something was happening that she didn't understand, and somehow it was tied to the choices she had made. Questions began to emerge in Nora's mind. Was she living in a play where she wasn't the one writing the script? She started to doubt whether her decisions had truly been her own, or if they had been influenced by something unseen. Perhaps the choices she had made in the past had set off a chain of events, a connection she was only now beginning to recognize. The details in the journal, the vague events, and the unanswered questions made Nora feel as though she was standing at a crossroads. She could no longer continue living in uncertainty, surrounded by questions without answers. These signs were clearly leading her toward a truth she could no longer avoid. This feeling wasn't fear, it was urgency. She needed to find the truth. She needed to understand the choices she had made and how they had shaped her present. She could not stand still, could not continue living a life she didn't fully comprehend. It was time for Nora to confront the bigger questions, to seek answers not just for herself but for everyone she had ever loved. As she closed the journal, a thought echoed in her mind. My purpose is not something I can find in other lives, but in the very choices I am making right now. She knew she had to embark on a journey to uncover the truth, and perhaps only by facing her past could she finally find the path that would lead her to her true purpose. Nora stepped into the midnight library once again, not out of curiosity this time, but because of an overwhelming sense of urgency. She realized that it wasn't just her own life that was changing. The people around her were also being affected by the choices she made in this library. Every time she entered the library and chose a different life, she sensed that small shifts in her own world were altering things in unpredictable ways. It was a strange feeling, as if an invisible thread was pulling her into different realities. And those threads weren't just shaping her life, but also influencing the paths of others. When she returned to the library this time, the librarian, the enigmatic figure who always seemed to exist like a shadow, was waiting for her in the corner of the room. "How does it feel, Nora?" he asked, his voice calm and distant, but his eyes filled with curiosity. Nora couldn't help but answer honestly. "I feel like I'm not just changing my own life. Every choice I make in this library seems to affect the people around me in ways I never imagined." The librarian smiled faintly, but there was something unsettling about that smile. "You're starting to realize your power, Nora. Every choice you make, every life you select, has the ability to shift the currents of this universe. The people around you are not separate from your choices. We cannot underestimate the interconnectedness of all things." Nora walked into a quieter section of the library, where dim lights cast soft glows on the aged books. She pulled out a book titled Choices and Their Consequences. As she flipped through its pages, a truth slowly began to unfold before her. Every decision, no matter how small, could create a ripple effect that was impossible to predict. And these ripples didn't stop with her. They continued outward, shaping the lives of countless others. One day she decided to step into an alternate reality where she was a renowned artist. But her life wasn't the only thing that changed. In this reality, she found herself in a heated argument with Lydia, an old friend with whom she had lost touch in her current life. Here, Lydia was a well-known art critic, and their encounter became an intense debate about whether art was truly necessary in a chaotic world. Their confrontation grew so tense that it led Lydia to reconsider her own path. In this reality, Lydia abandoned her career as a critic and set out on a new path, one she had never envisioned before. Nora felt disoriented, unable to fully grasp what was happening, but she knew that something in the library had just rewritten a part of Lydia's life. When she returned to her real life, things felt off. Lydia, the former art critic, was no longer the same person. Instead, she had become an educator, dedicating herself to helping young, aspiring artists who lacked opportunities. It was like a sudden wave had crashed over Nora, forcing her to recognize that every shift in her own life, every choice she made in the library, was causing unforeseen changes in the lives of others. A growing tension filled Nora's mind. She couldn't shake the thought that these shifts were a direct result of the decision she had made in the library. The reality she lived in now was a consequence of her past choices. The people around her, her friends, her family, were all being altered by the paths she had taken. She wasn't just shaping her own destiny, she was reshaping the world around her. Fatigue started to creep into her thoughts. She didn't know if these changes were for the better or if she had gone too far. Had she overstepped by interfering in the lives of others? Had she crossed the line by making choices without fully understanding their consequences? One day she returned to the library once more. She sat down in her usual chair and stared at the books spread out before her. The librarian appeared again, his eyes filled with a knowing wisdom. "You're worried about the changes you've created, aren't you?" he said. Nora nodded, unable to hide the tension building inside her. "I can't help but feel that every time I make a choice in the library, it's not just me who is affected, others are too. Am I going too far? Have I broken something that can't be fixed?" The librarian smiled. "Nora, that's an important question. But remember, choices don't always have to be perfect. Every decision can shift the course of things, and sometimes those changes help the people around us grow, evolve, and become who they were meant to be in ways they never imagined. Life isn't a sequence of predictable actions, but what matters is that you found your purpose within these changes. Nora paused for a moment, then slowly lifted her head, a newfound clarity beginning to shine in her eyes. She realized she didn't need to fear the changes she had set in motion. She couldn't control everything, but she could learn to accept those changes and embrace her journey. She began to understand that every choice, no matter how challenging or uncertain, was an essential part of her search for meaning. Each decision Nora made in the library had unlocked new possibilities, new realities. But in the end, she understood that no matter how many choices she faced, all she truly needed to do was live as herself, accept the decisions she had made, and learn to exist within the changes they brought. With that realization, Nora decided she would no longer fear altering the lives of others. She couldn't go back, but she could choose how to move forward. Nora couldn't stop thinking about the library, about the choices she had experimented with and the changes each life had brought. Even though she had lived through many different lives, some filled with passion and joy, others with regret, she realized that something was still missing. A deep void in her heart remained unfilled. This time, when she returned to the library, she was no longer searching for alternative lives. She no longer wanted to escape into another existence, but instead sought something deeper within the life she was already living. Ultimately, she decided to reconnect with people from her past, those she had once known throughout her life. She felt as though pieces of her history were still missing, and in order to understand who she was now, she had to face the people she had left behind. This wasn't just about revisiting memories. It was about confronting the choices she had made, the choices that seemed to have led her to the life she now had. That day, when Nora stepped into the familiar cafe she had frequented years ago, her heart tightened. This was where she had met Max, her best friend. They had shared countless unforgettable moments here. Max had always been the one person Nora felt safe with, the one she could confide in about everything weighing on her heart. They had spent their university years dreaming and planning for the future, but after she had taken a different path, their relationship had gradually faded. She couldn't recall exactly why, but she knew that one day she simply stopped keeping in touch with Max. A wave of regret surged through her as she remembered those days. Max was sitting in the corner of the cafe, reading a book. When he looked up and saw Nora walk in, his eyes lit up with surprise. "Nora?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "How have you been?" Nora smiled, though she felt a bit awkward. "I'm doing well, Max. How about you?" Max smiled, setting his book down and gesturing for her to sit. "Come on, don't be a stranger. It's been ages." As she sat across from him, Nora felt an odd tension between them. Once she and Max could talk about anything without hesitation, but now an unfamiliar silence lingered, as if an invisible wall stood between them. She thought back to the days when they had planned for their futures together, but now even small talk seemed difficult. "Max," Nora finally spoke, breaking the silence. "I want to ask you something. Why did we lose touch for so long?" Max was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Nora, you changed a lot. I felt like you drifted away, like something bigger was pulling you in another direction. You weren't the same friend I used to know. I could feel it, and slowly, we just stopped having things to talk about." His words struck a deep chord in Nora's heart. She hadn't thought she had changed so much, but Max's response made her realize that change isn't always obvious to the person experiencing it. Maybe all this time, she had been too preoccupied with running away from real-life problems to hold on to the relationships that mattered. She had left behind her past, her old friends, and the beautiful memories in pursuit of something new, only to now realize that this change had made her a stranger to herself and to those she had once loved. After their conversation, Nora felt as though she were standing between two worlds. A part of her longed to return to old relationships, to the safety and familiarity of the past. But another part of her felt she had gone too far to turn back. The changes in her life had made it impossible to easily reclaim what had been lost. Though she had come to understand that every choice held meaning, and that every life had its own value, the realization that she could never truly return to the past left her feeling conflicted. She began to understand that each time she returned to the past, she felt even more distant from the present. Her old friends were no longer the same people she had once known, and that forced her to face a painful truth. Life cannot be built solely on the past. Every choice she had made, whether good or bad, had shaped the person she was today. If she wanted to move forward, she couldn't live forever in memories. Nora continued her journey, not to return to the past, but to better understand herself and the decisions she had made. She met people from her old life again, each of whom had their own stories and personal transformations. She realized that while she had been lost in nostalgia over past relationships, others had learned to change and grow from their own experiences. One of these encounters was with Clara, the close friend with whom she had once shared significant moments in her life. But now, Clara had a life of her own, and the connection between them was no longer the same. This forced Nora to face the reality that sometimes relationships cannot last forever because each person must grow in their own way. Nora's journey to rediscover herself was not just about searching for lost relationships, but about learning to live truthfully with herself, accepting change, and letting go of the past. The people she once knew and the memories she had cherished were merely parts of her journey. Now, she had to find a way to embrace the present and the people around her without being haunted by what once was. Nora's story was a journey filled with challenges, but also a lesson in change and the ability to live with the decisions she had made. In the end, she realized that everyone has their own choices and their own life paths, and that relationships do not always last forever. What truly mattered was living fully in the present, accepting change, and moving forward. Nora sat silently in the library, listening to the creaking of the old chair beneath her, a sound that felt like whispers from the past. A past she had lived, but had also forgotten in a fleeting moment between two worlds. She looked around, and the familiar walls of the library began to change. The bookshelves, the worn wooden tables, had become a part of her memory, yet now they no longer felt the same. This feeling was not the peacefulness she had experienced when she first stepped into the library. Instead, it was something unfamiliar, even unsettling. A feeling that made her start to doubt herself. Ever since she returned to the library, everything had seemed too easy. She only needed to open a book, and she would step into another life. Infinite possibilities unfolded before her. But gradually, as more books were opened, she felt increasingly dissatisfied. Every life she had lived contained memorable moments, yet none of them made her feel complete. She had lived in the past, in the lives she had imagined, but all of them left her with a sense of disconnection. She could try living as an artist, a writer, or a successful entrepreneur, but no matter how many times she tried, she still did not feel happy. Something was missing, something inexplicable. And then, Nora found the truth. She turned back to the book the library had given her, the book she had believed would help her find the answer. In a sudden, unexpected moment, the words on the pages seemed to break apart before her eyes. The story was not about another life, but about the very life she was already living. It was a truth the library had hidden from her, or more precisely, a truth she had refused to acknowledge. She looked at herself and realized that the change she had been searching for was not in living a different life, but in changing how she saw her own. This library was not a place to choose different lives, but a place to rediscover the choices she had already made in her current life. She had been searching for happiness elsewhere, in other people, in other lives. But the truth was that happiness could only come from within. She had failed to see that happiness was a change in perspective, not something external. Nora began to understand that the choices she had made throughout her life, whether they seemed like mistakes or imperfections, had led her here, to this very moment, to recognize that she alone held the key to peace within herself. She did not need to live a different life to find happiness. Happiness was not something measured by success or career achievements, but by understanding oneself and accepting everything that had happened, including mistakes, failures, and pain. As Nora began to grasp this truth, something inside her started to change. The library was no longer a place that transported her through different lives. It was no longer an escape. The library was simply a space that reflected the nature of the choices she had made, helping her see the essence of decision-making in her present life. She was not the person in the life she had dreamed of, but she was the one who created these moments. She did not need to change others to feel happy. She only needed to change how she perceived life and herself. Happiness was not a destination, but a state of being. One that we achieve when we fully embrace what we have, accept everything that happens, and find joy in the simplest moments of life. A sense of relief slowly spread through Nora's body as she began to realize that she no longer needed to search for a perfect life. The life she was living was already enough for her to find meaning in every step, in every small decision she made each day. The other lives in the library were not solutions to her sorrow. They were only illusions, shadows of things she had once let go of. Nora stood up from her chair, walked away from the library, and moved toward the window, where the morning light streamed into the room. She looked outside and understood that even though life was not perfect, it was still beautiful. She could now see the wonderful things in her own life, things she had never noticed before. The love of those around her, the relationships that had helped her stay strong, and the simple moments, a morning cup of coffee, a friend's smile, or a peaceful afternoon, had brought her the sense of peace she had been searching for all along. She realized that happiness was not the end point of a long journey, but the journey itself. Happiness lay in every moment she lived, in every choice she made, whether it was a small decision or a life-changing one. What mattered was that she no longer felt like she was racing against time or trying to become someone else. She had learned that living fully as herself, accepting and loving the imperfections, was the way to find true meaning in life. As she stepped outside, Nora felt more at peace than ever before. She no longer worried about the other lives she could have lived. Instead, she began to cherish and appreciate the life she was living, even with its challenges and imperfections. She had learned that the meaning of life was not found elsewhere. It was within her, in every choice she made, and in how she faced each day. Nora did not need to change the world or others. She only needed to change how she saw her own life and live fully with what she had. And that was the greatest truth the library had wanted her to realize. That happiness and the meaning of life were not out of reach, but were already present in her current life, in every step she chose to take. That night, as darkness engulfed the room where Nora sat, a sense of helplessness and anxiety weighed heavily on her once more. The midnight library reappeared in her mind, like an escape, a salvation she could not let go of. She felt as though she were standing between two worlds, one filled with choices she had yet to make, and the other haunted by the shadows of the decisions she had already taken. The library, though no longer leading her into alternate lives, had become a place where she confronted the great questions of existence and of herself. Finally, after months of searching for answers through the old books in the library, Nora realized that the life she was living was not what she truly wanted. She could no longer exist in the illusion of safety, deceiving herself by pretending that everything was fine when in reality, she was still waiting for some miraculous change from the outside rather than from within herself. She recalled the days filled with hope, when the Midnight Library had given her the chance to experiment with different lives. Each time she returned, the library placed her in a new story, where she could live out the decisions she had never dared to make, leaving behind a dull job, building a happy family, or pursuing the passions she had abandoned. Each time, she found herself standing before a choice, a new path, and wondering whether a different decision would lead her to true happiness. But now, there was no library. No more alternate lives to test. No fresh choices to rescue her from fear and uncertainty. Reality, painful and challenging, was the only path left for her to take. And it was at that moment that Nora understood. Her salvation had never been in the lives she had experienced within the library, but in how she faced what she had neglected in her present life. It felt as though something was pressing down on her mind, making it hard to breathe. She looked into the mirror and saw the reflection of a woman who had buried her dreams, her desires, and her hopes for years. She asked herself, did she have the courage to face the truth about who she had become? She had spent too much time blaming circumstances, other people, an unfulfilling job, and past events that had left her feeling stuck. But now, with all those justifications stripped away, she saw the truth. She had been the one who let opportunities for change slip through her fingers. She had refused to step outside her comfort zone out of fear, uncertainty, and despair in herself. The choices she had made, believing them to be the best at the time, now remained only as scars and painful memories. It made her feel as if she had missed out on something essential in life. She remembered her dreams, the hopes she had carried when she was young, dreams that had never been realized because she had chosen security over risk. Now, she had to face herself to confront the failures and regrets she had long ignored. Can I change? Nora asked herself. Do I have the strength to start over, to face my fears, and to create a new life? Nora felt exhausted. She realized that no external change could help her rediscover the meaning of life. She had to find the strength within herself. If she could not change, if she could not shift her perspective on the life she was living, then everything would remain the same. Nora's internal confrontation was not just a struggle between her and the choices of her past, but a battle between her and the fears she had carried throughout her life. She had to decide whether she had the courage to change. Would she dare to face her pain, her failures, and abandon her comfort zones to step out of her own shadow? Or would she continue to live in the shell of stability and regret? Nora stood at a crossroads. One path was to continue living in the familiarity of what she knew, even if it felt empty and unfulfilling. The other path led to a new life, one where she would have to confront every challenge, every uncertainty, and everything she had once ignored. But it was the only road that could lead her to rediscovering her purpose. It was the road of transformation, of facing herself. She recalled the words of an old teacher from a lecture she had once attended. If you cannot change the world, change yourself. That was the defining decision Nora had to make. To find meaning, she had to change herself. Only by living authentically, embracing her values and desires, could she uncover the true essence of life. Nora took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel all the exhaustion, fear, and anxiety within her. And then, she made her choice. She would walk the path she had long avoided. She would change. At that moment, as Nora began making new decisions, she realized that life did not offer a perfect path. Every choice, no matter how big or small, would shape her future, but the key was to embrace it and accept that nothing could ever be perfect. She started over with the simplest things, reconnecting with old friends, rediscovering the passion she had abandoned in her work, and taking steps toward the things she had once feared. Nora understood that even the smallest changes could bring about a new beginning, a way to reclaim the life within her life. These changes were not meant to replace the past, but to embrace it and live fully with it. Because in life, we don't always find a straight path. But if we learn to accept uncertainty, imperfection, and our own choices, we can find happiness right here, in this very moment. In the end, Nora realized that the meaning of life was not a fixed goal that one could simply achieve. It was not about success or failure measured by completed objectives. The meaning of life was a journey, an endless discovery, and the most important thing was how we chose to live it. Through small decisions, through small steps, life could become more meaningful if we opened our hearts and dared to change. Nora stood on the beach, the place where she had once found moments of joy in her youth. The waves gently caressed the shore, like a soft melody playing in her mind. This familiar scene now carried a different feeling. No longer was it an escape from worries, no longer a place of uncertainty about the future, but instead, it was a place of quiet serenity within her soul. She realized that she had undergone a profound transformation, one that did not come from external changes, but from within her heart and mind. The long days spent searching for the meaning of life, the journeys into the midnight library, the different lives she had lived, and the mysteries of every choice All of it had now become gentle memories. The questions about purpose and existence that she had once wrestled with no longer seemed so important. In this moment, everything felt clear. She understood that there was never a need to search far and wide, because the true meaning of life had always been present in what she already had. The choices she had made in her life, whether mistakes or imperfect decisions, were precisely the choices that had shaped her into the person she was today. And that, with all its joys, sorrows, failures, and successes, was what made life meaningful. Not the lives she had imagined in the library, nor the alternate reality she had explored, but the life she was living right now. And that was the most important realization of all. Nora turned back to watch the waves rolling onto the shore, her eyes glistening in the golden glow of the setting sun. She recalled the moments when she had stood at crossroads, contemplating the choices she had never had the chance to make. She had once believed that if she had chosen differently, if she had taken another path, perhaps she would have found a more fulfilling life. But now, looking back, she understood that it was the path she had taken that had led her to happiness. It was the missteps, the struggles, and the difficult decisions that had shaped her identity. Life was not meant to be a sequence of perfect events, but a journey that each of us must navigate with all its uncertainties and mistakes. She remembered those early days after returning to reality, when everything had felt meaningless. The lives she had experienced in the library no longer seemed as significant because she realized they were merely alternatives, illusions of better possibilities. What she needed was not to find a better life, but to accept and cherish the one she already had. She had learned that happiness did not come from a perfect set of circumstances, but from how we face and appreciate the present moment. Nora felt an indescribable sense of relief. She turned back toward the city, the place where she had built a new life, where she had a job and relationships she had nurtured. Although it was not the life she had envisioned in her dreams, she realized that it was the life she had created. Old friends, colleagues, and even family, all were important parts of her journey. Each person, each moment contributed to the person she was becoming. She once thought this life had no meaning, but now Nora understood that this very life was the clearest reflection of everything she had learned and experienced. Every day, she woke up. Every morning she saw the sunrise was a new opportunity to change, to live more fully. She might not always be able to control everything, but she could decide how to face each challenge. She realized that life was not a sequence of perfect moments, but a continuous process of learning, exploring, and growing. What she had learned from the library was not how to change the past, but how to live truthfully with herself. Every decision Nora made now was not just about her, but also affected those around her. She had come to understand that what we can do for others is an essential part of finding our own purpose. Sharing, empathy, and love were indispensable elements of life. Nora had found a way to love herself and those around her, not because they were perfect, but because they were part of her journey. At sunset, as the golden light reflected off the surface of the sea, Nora sat down and took a deep breath. She felt peace spreading through her body, like the waves gently lapping against the shore. Everything now seemed so simple and effortless. She was no longer searching for something grand, but was instead living fully in the present moment. Happiness was not a destination, but a journey. Every step in life carried meaning, whether big or small. This journey was never about seeking perfection, but about learning to appreciate life and everything she already had. She did not need to change the world. She only needed to change the way she perceived and approached her own life. And through that, she had found happiness and fulfillment in being herself, a person who had learned to live with the choices she had made. Thank you for following Nora's story. May this story serve as a reminder that purpose is not something distant or unreachable, but exists in the small moments of everyday life. Even the smallest changes can create a profound impact, and sometimes, happiness comes simply from learning to cherish what we already have. The story we have just experienced, the journey of Nora searching for the meaning of life, is not just a story about choices or alternate lives. It is a story about love, a love that is not always filled with sweet moments, but one that is enduring, resilient, and able to withstand every challenge, even when life places us in seemingly insurmountable situations. The love in this story is not only the affection between Nora and those around her, but also the love she discovers for herself, for life, and for every choice she has made. We often think that love is something easily found, but in Nora's journey, she had to learn how to love herself before she could truly love others. This love is not something that can be sought externally, but something each person must uncover within themselves. True love is not something that only exists in moments of happiness. It is a fundamental part of life, whether we are experiencing pain, suffering, or failure. Nora endured many failures in her life, but through them, she realized that love is not about the perfection we often seek. Real love is about living fully with imperfections, embracing our flaws, and accepting every challenge that life presents. This is much like the lives Nora experienced in the Midnight Library. Every life she lived had its own joys and sorrows, but the most important lesson was that love was never left behind. It was always present, even when she chose a different path. The greatest lesson she learned was that love is the foundation for moving forward, for forgiveness, for change, and for living truthfully with oneself. Each of us faces choices in life, but we do not always realize that every decision can alter our path. In Nora's story, she learned that no choice is perfect and no path is without challenges. However, the most important thing is having the courage to make a choice and continue along that path, even knowing that moments of regret may arise. Nora once believed that she had missed many opportunities in life, that the choices she made in the past had prevented her from finding meaning. But when she looked back, she realized that no choice was meaningless. Every decision, whether right or wrong, had shaped the person she had become. Those choices had helped her understand that nothing in life is in vain. Everything carries a lesson, an experience that allows us to grow. This story reminds us that even if we make mistakes or experience failures, we can always start over, as every moment in life presents an opportunity for change. Choices do not always lead to perfection, but they are what give life meaning. To find the purpose of life, we must have the courage to make decisions, even if those decisions may lead us down challenging paths. One of the most profound messages of this story is that the search for meaning is not a fixed goal, but an ongoing inner journey. Nora was not just searching for purpose externally, she had to rediscover herself. Her journey was not about finding the perfect goal or job, but about finding acceptance and love for herself. This is not always easy, but it is through confronting ourselves that we realize change begins from within. Through each alternate life that Nora experienced, she learned that purpose is not something to be sought in distant places, but rather in connection with oneself, with relationships, and with the present moment. Meaning is not something that can be attained once and for all, but is a continuous journey without a final destination. The important thing is to learn how to live with our choices and find meaning in every step we take. Nora's story also serves as a reminder to live fully with what we have. Instead of endlessly searching for a grand purpose, we can find meaning in the small things around us. Every moment in life can become a significant part of our journey toward meaning, and living wholeheartedly will lead us to deeper discoveries about ourselves. Ultimately, this story is not just about Nora's search for purpose, but also about lessons in forgiveness and acceptance. We all make mistakes in life, but what matters is learning how to forgive, not just others, but also ourselves. Nora learned that forgiveness is not about giving up. It is about freeing oneself from the past and continuing forward on a new path. Thank you for accompanying Nora on her journey of self-discovery. I hope this story inspires you to find the true meaning of life, to understand that no choice is meaningless, and that every decision contributes to shaping the person we become. And most importantly, remember that life is not an easy journey, but it is through difficulties and challenges that we uncover our true selves.
To protect their privacy and identity.